Mr. Marcus Papadopoulos, international analyst in London, is with us. We want to ask him about the comments by different Israeli officials. Mr. Papadopoulos, hello, and welcome to the show. And I want to ask you that the Israeli army says that it's the most ethical army in the world, but they have at the same time killed over 40 people in Palestine and also in Lebanon. I want to know your take about this claim.
The IDF is demonstrating to the entire world that it is the most amoral military force in the world, though the Turkish military is not far behind. The Israeli military is the most brutal, the most savage military that is in existence in the world today. And the Israeli military speciality in murdering civilians is something that the Israelis have perfected over many years. When Israeli politicians or when Israeli military officials or indeed when Western mainstream journalists say that the IDF is the most, quote, moral military in the world, this is not just disgusting propaganda. This is inversion. It is an inversion of the truth. Ask any person in Palestine, ask any person in Lebanon, ask any person in Syria, man, woman or child, and they will say to you how brutal, how savage the Israeli military is. And let me say to people in the Western world that the Israeli military doesn't just specialize in murdering Muslim civilians. It also specializes in murdering Christian civilians because many Palestinians, Lebanese and Syrians are Christians. So let it be known across the world that the Israeli military is the most amoral military in the world.
Mr. Papadopoulos, the Israeli finance minister has said, Smotrich, has said that so much vast parts of the Middle East should be annexed to Israel. They want parts of Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, that those parts should be annexed to the Israeli soil. What's your take on this one regarding the point that you said that that Israel has the most unethical army?
The Israeli ruling elite is clearly pursuing an agenda called Greater Israel. When the Israeli military invaded Palestine in October of 2023, specifically Gaza, I said on television at the time that the Israelis intend to expel the population, the Palestinian population from Gaza, and or murder the Palestinian population of Gaza. And from there, the Israelis will annex Gaza. And that is what is happening at the moment, though of course the Israeli military is bogged down in Gaza in a brutal war. All is not going well for the Israelis in Gaza, but nonetheless, Israeli officials are openly saying that they intend to expel the Palestinian population from Gaza and then take control of Gaza for themselves. Furthermore, Israeli officials are openly saying that parts of southern Lebanon will belong to Israel. So we clearly see that Israel is pursuing an agenda of achieving a greater Israel in West Asia. And that is something that, of course, Western mainstream media will never report on. They will never tell the British people that, or the American people that, or the French people that, or the Canadian people that. The Israelis are only able to pursue a greater Israel. They are only able to murder tens of thousands of civilians, including women and children, because of the unconditional support Israel receives year on year from America. So whilst the Israelis have a very powerful military, nonetheless, if it wasn't for the support of America, then Israel would be behaving in a very different manner in West Asia. Israel would not be invading Palestine. Israel would not be invading Lebanon. And Israel most certainly would not be pursuing a greater Israel. It does that simply because it has a blank check of support from America.
Peter Forth, the former ambassador of the UK in Syria, believes, and he has already said that whoever that has hopes on the Western countries to stop Israel is actually it's a useless hope. So what's your take about the wars that Israel has staged on Gaza and Lebanon with the Western support?
Israel is the main conduit for American and British influence and power in West Asia. Without Israel, America cannot rule supreme in West Asia and indeed in North Africa. It follows, therefore, that the American establishment and the British establishment will continue to provide political, economic, military, and intelligence assistance to the Israelis. Regardless of any criticism the British government and the American government says of Israel in public, that is merely for public consumption. That is merely a way of the Americans and the British maintaining the myth that they are the guardians of human rights in the world. In reality, the Americans and the British have said to the Israelis, do whatever you want, providing this ensures that Israel remains strong, and through that, we, America and Britain, will continue to dominate West Asia and North Africa. So recently, the British government announced that it was suspending some military exports to Israel. Well, that is a lie, a complete and utter lie. Let us not forget, the British ruling elite is the most devious and the most deceitful in the world. Yes, more deceitful, more devious than the Israeli ruling elite. The British will continue to provide all of the military support that Israel requires to pursue Israel's horrific, unprovoked wars of aggression in West Asia, be it against the Palestinians or against the Lebanese or against the Syrians. Again, without Israel, the Western ruling elites cannot dominate West Asia. That is why Washington and London provides unconditional support to the Israelis and have done and has done ever since 1948.
You pointed out that the Western rulers cannot dominate West Asia. So why they insist on staging wars in this region with the point that there are so many problems, in the United States and in Britain. The people have so many problems inside the countries, but they're still spending the money on staging wars in the Middle East. Why is that?
Well, I'm very glad you asked me this question. It is a very relevant question. The Western ruling elites do not govern the Western world. They rule the Western world. The Western world is not a democracy. The Western world is a tyranny and a kleptocracy. The Western ruling elites, such as the British royal family, the British aristocracy, the banking elites, the financial elites, the media barons and the Zionists, have no loyalty or love to the nations of the Western world, such as the American nation or the British nation. Take Britain, for example. The British ruling elite hates the British people. The British ruling elite has systematically destroyed the British national identity. The British ruling elite has destroyed the cultural and spiritual values of the British people. The British ruling elite has virtually destroyed Christianity in Britain, partly through bringing immigrants from outside of the Western world into Britain in order to destroy the British national identity. So these immigrants that the British establishment are bringing into Britain, such as Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, etc., are being brought here for a purpose by the British ruling elite. Again, the British ruling elite hate the British people. So that is why the British ruling elite and the American ruling elite provide to Israel billions of dollars or billions of pounds, so that the British ruling elite and the American ruling elite continue to dominate West Asia. They will not spend money on looking after the British people or the American people, because the American establishment and the British establishment hate the American people and the British people respectively. The British ruling elite and the American ruling elite understand that in order to destroy a nation, the best way of doing it is through internal means, insidious means. So, for example, there is no doubt in my mind that the Americans and the British have flooded Iran with Afghan immigrants as a way of destroying the Iranian national identity, as a way of weakening the Iranian revolution. That is what the Americans and the British have done in America, in Britain, and in continental Europe. That is why the Western ruling elites are so dangerous. Not just the Israelis are dangerous. Again, without the Western ruling elites, Israel is nothing.
Mr. Papadopoulos, I also want to speak about the double standard in the Western behavior. When Israel attacks Gaza and Lebanon, they call it self-defense, in spite of the fact that over 40,000 people have been killed in Gaza and so many have been also get martyred in Lebanon. They still call it a self-defense. On the other hand, when Iran reacts to their attack, they call it an aggression. This is a double standard. Can you describe this double standard, please?
Well, at the beginning of this interview, I used the word inversion. Here is another example of inversion. Israel invades Palestine. Israel invades Lebanon. And the Western ruling elites refer to this act of aggression as Israel has a right to self-defense. That is inversion. But then what else will Washington and London, or how else will Washington and London describe Israel's aggression? Because the Americans and the British know that under international law, Israel has no right to invade Lebanon or Palestine, and Israel has no right to bomb Syria. The British and the Americans know that. They know that the Israelis have no legal right to be doing what they are doing currently in West Asia. So the Americans and the British have come up with this ridiculous, stupid, laughable concept of Israel has a right to self-defense. Well, international law says something else. If every country in the world pursued this concept of a right to self-defense, then practically every country in the world would be invading their neighbours. Why else was the United Nations established? Why else is international law in existence? To ensure that neighbours respect the sovereignty of their fellow neighbours. But of course, Israel doesn't do that. And of course, America and Britain are the leading criminals, the leading violators of international law and the United Nations Charter in the world. Yes, they are even worse than the Israelis. Just look at how many countries the Americans and the British have either invaded or bombed. So the Americans and the British, again, care nothing for international law. They care nothing for the United Nations Charter. All they care about is ensuring Western global supremacy, maintaining Western global supremacy and strengthening Western global supremacy. If that means themselves killing thousands or millions of people, or the Israelis killing tens of thousands of people, then they will do it. The people who rule the Western world are murderers, and mass murderers at that.